Hey guys, Walter Fedczuk here to tell you that Unicorn.com may be the world's premier esports betting site, but they're also your best bet for keeping up with all the esports you love. With their site's newest update, they've reinvented their Live Now system and created a TV guide style layout to find out when your favorite teams will be playing next. And if that isn't simple enough, they've even added a search bar to help filter it down even further. And you know, even if you aren't a gambling fan, Unicorn's newest update is a must-have for any esports fan. And you might even discover your favorite new writer in their news section. We've got my man Drowlin with some excellent CSGO content, and you can find some fantastic articles from my lovely co-host, Chase Wassenar, as well. So check out the new layout at Unicorn.com, because there are few places where you can stay up to date on all your favorite esports, and Unicorn can help. Unicorn.com. Welcome to the new Sportsbook. Hello Internet, my name is Walter Ceades Fedczuk, and welcome to another special edition of the Rough Drafts Guess the Line podcast. It is the EULCS Summer Split Semifinals. We are already on to round 2 of the playoffs over in the European LCS, and it was an interesting quarterfinals round to say the least. I have a little egg on my face. I'm gonna have to eat some crow here, but that's fine. I mean, it was a fine weekend, and I'm just gonna say it was fine. And Chase is gonna be all high and mighty, and he'll be all excited. So, as always, my co-host and good friend Chase, RedShirtKing Wassenar. Chase, how are you doing on this lovely evening as we record?
You know, I'm doing great. You know, it's hard sometimes to be right. Like I apparently was back in the day when I said at the beginning of this season, I thought that by the end of the split, Misfits would be better than the Unicorns of Love. Now, I was wrong to put them as high as I did. That was wrong. But it turns out I was also wrong to put the Unicorns as high as I did, because this was a weird week for people that really thought that the favorites were going to come out and stomp, that there were these clear tiers of teams between the top 4 and the bottom 2. I think we learned this week of nothing else. Those tiers just aren't there. I saw the Misfits team that I thought this team was going to be at the beginning of the split. I have no idea how long it's going to last. Certainly the sample size doesn't tell me that it's going to last all that long, but honestly, this is just making me wish that we'd had more games during the regular season. Like, these are the kind of things we could have had, some of these ebbs and flows. We could have had these moments where these teams kind of had that second meetup, and we could have had the rematch. We could have seen how maybe some of these teams could have fleshed things out a little bit more.
82 match regular season. I'm all for it. Let's go.
I'm just asking for the 18 that North America gets. I'm not saying that we need to be exactly the same, but, you know, separate but equal. We should have the same, you know, we should have enough.
The Rough Drafts podcast does not endorse separate but equal in any way, shape, or form. That is a disclaimer. That is from my lawyer that is sitting right here. Nick, the producer, has put his head in a bucket because he can't believe that Chase just said that.
Look, man, I think that North America's league, LCS, they've gone on record now saying that they want this to be a Western League of Legends scene. That's why they delay the North American start times for the European ones to end. So I say we need to, you know, if you want to keep the format separate, like, that's fine, but give us an equal amount of content. Give us an equal amount of film to watch that we could scrutinize so that we can see these teams evolve, because we should not have had 2 series that just came out of nowhere. I mean, this was, no one expected Misfits to 3-0 Unicorns of Love. Even I, as someone who was on this pod last week saying it's going to be closer than people think, there are problematic matchups here, no way, in no universe did I think this was going to be a 3-0 for Misfits. And I think that people who would have picked that certainly wouldn't have seen anything within the EULCS split to back up that prediction. So I think that this was a shocking week. This was a surprising week. I think that it is a great case for why those middle-of-the-pack teams maybe needed some more games to flesh things out and get to here. Because, look, Misfits, their rebuild worked. And Splyce, I think, put up a great effort, and it's an effort that I think will benefit them when the gauntlet rolls around. But we'll get to we should probably just get right into these Vanquished teams, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say let's just start with Unicorns Love. Let's get it over with.
Yeah.
Chase. Exile is just really bad at League of Legends now.
He's not good.
It kind of hurts my soul that he's just this bad. I thought this was really going to be a breakout year for him, really build upon what they did in the spring, and just he doesn't play anything. Like, he has no champion pool. His champion pool is shallower than Vladimir's. Like, it lasts as long too. That's about it. Like, he can play Vladimir and what else?
That was the irony. He could have played Vladimir this week. He chose not to. I don't understand. I think there are two levels of problems that I have with the Unicorns of Love performance this past week, and I think we need to address them separately. And I'm going to start with Sheepy. Like, for all the credit we give him, and he is a great coach, he's a great innovator, but we have like one of these series every year, and it's the reason we've jumped on them in the past, and we've learned now not to jump quite so hard, but we've had these moments before where Sheepy overthinks the game plan and goes against what has defined his team. And this was a great example. I don't know what the plan was in these drafts. I mean, Talon is okay in the fact that Exile can play it, right. But this is a team that at their best, what have they been doing? It's mid to late game, team fight around neutral objectives, get your tempo game going and maximize your efficiency on these trades. Early game Snowball is not the Unicorns of Love. Their early game is one of the weakest parts about them as a team during the regular season. They were regularly below 50 early game rating, which means that their early game was putting them at average at a disadvantage, slight one, and they were making up for it with their team play. But what is Talon going to do in a 5v5 team fight, especially in this current tank meta? What was the plan to have, in game 3 in particular, you have the Zac, the Sivir, like, they're just, you really went in on all these map rotations, like, we're just going to get these kills, and Xerxes going to get everything going, and we're just going to
fight. Like that was it. It's just they were like, we are gonna keep fighting. We're just gonna fight. We're gonna fight, but we're gonna start fighting earlier. And Misfits were like, okay, like, we'll fight you earlier.
Yeah, you know what?
All right.
Fighting early. This was the one stat like we kept bringing up. The Misfits for most of the season were the second best early game team in the league. Yeah, they had a couple bad weeks up at the end of the split because, as we talked about before, and we will talk about a little bit later, they've changed a lot of things in their game plan. But they're still known. That was their thing. Because Power of Evil's such a great laner, right? And Alfari used to be a great top laner, and we know that Hansama and Ignar hold their own there. I just don't understand. I don't understand from a philosophical perspective. Even if they were champions that Unicorns could play well, and some of them I'm not sure they were, but even if they were, this was the wrong team to try this out against. It almost felt like it was a disrespect. Like they didn't think the Misfits could keep up with that constant fighting pressure, and I think that's just a misread.
Do we feel like this is the bad Unicorns of Love, like Sheepy prep game, and that they go into the gauntlet and they're gonna look better, or is the weakness of Exile just, and even Hillsong, like I mentioned it, I didn't think Hillsong played awful, but like every time Ignar played anything that could hook him, he was like, all right, I'm just gonna walk into hooks, and maybe it was Ignar playing out of his mind, maybe it was Hillsong just not dodging or just not reading it right, but like
both can be true.
Yeah, both can be true. So
I can't put Hillsong on my all pro list. These moments are exactly why, because there were so many moments where they needed him to be in those team fights and play that role, and he got hooked and he was dead. And that's, I like, as a coach, when I thought about what I needed my support to do, that is something I could not afford. And you just saw in the series, I think, how much that can spiral out of control when you when you have a support that is so aggressive. That's the one mentality they have. If you need to shift gears, there just wasn't anything there. The Unicorns of Love, especially, they didn't have the hard CC. It was really just a weird kind of week for that. But I mean, good news and bad news, Unicorns. On the bad news, you clearly didn't play to your strengths, and You clearly have a problem with your mid lane, and it's not getting any better. And Chachi is still not playing near the same level that he was in the spring split.
Mm-hmm.
He got his All-Pro award. I'm happy for him, even though I didn't vote for him. That's fine, but he was not the first team top laner, right? This was a third team, snuck in there. Somebody, it's
snuck in there.
There were a few people close to him in the votes. I don't think he was it was not a definitive great Visit Chachi season. I mean, obviously you disagree. I know you voted for him, so I'm not here.
I also voted for Expect too.
But Chachi needed to get into get into those laning matchups and win those matchups hard. That's what Alfari's weakest part was this season. Yeah, guess what? Alfari was the MVP of this series. Alfari had a 37.1 KDA or something absurd. Yeah, 37 KDA this weekend.
I wouldn't have agreed with that.
I mean, I'm just saying,
I wouldn't agree with Alfari being the MVP.
I'm not saying he was the most valuable player either. His numbers were absurd, and I think he got credit because he was going up against Chachi, and people are like, oh, Chachi's great. Alfari looked great in this, therefore he must have been great. I think Alfari played well, but I think that Chachi lost lane. Chachi was behind a fair chunk of times, and even when he had gotten little leads, all that meant is that Maxler would just come take care of him, and the vision wasn't there. They weren't able to deal with a lot of that early game pressure, and they were constantly, I think that's one of the reasons all these games ended as quickly as they did. Now, the good news is that the Unicorns of Love, from a macro perspective, I thought were solid. I thought that their rotations, they were rotating to the right places. They weren't executing, but they were in the right place at the right time. And they did on multiple occasions, especially in game 2. I noted several times in which they minimized the damage that a fight, they lost a fight, but they were right there to defend the tower. So they only lost 1 tower instead of 2, or they didn't lose any towers at all. And it was just a little bit of vision pressure. They can minimize the damages. So we know that they understand the game in that way. And that's macro understanding than they get credrit for, which is why
that's never been an issue for Unicorns of Love. Their macro understanding, I don't think it's ever, even back in the first IEM San Jose, playing something like Twisted Fate Jungle, is because you have incredible macro understanding. I don't think that's ever been Sheepy's issue or anything. It just
tell that to analysts who make jokes about how unicorns don't care about macro play, which is that's
all they do. They don't do anything micro. It's all macro. It's all the chaos style, the animal style, whatever the hell they want to call it, to make Yost pull his hair out on end. That's macro. That's not micro. That's not all right, let's get every single minion in this wave. That's let's just fight. Let's just roam around the map and fight people. That is macro at its core. And anyone who says that the Unicorns of Love don't understand macro are just wrong.
Look, you're preaching to the choir, and I want the Unicorns of Love fans to hear this choir that we're joining, because I don't want you to feel like we're haters.
Joining? I've been at the front of it. I'm the choir director. What are you talking
fair. The moral of the story is, Unicorns,
I'm sorry.
This was a bad series. It's a bad loss, and it's the kind of bad loss that, we have some Unicorns of Love fans in the Discord. I know a couple of them in real life. This is the I don't even care about Europe anymore kind of depressing. This is the I've already given up on the gauntlet kind of depressing. I've never seen a fan base that is so well known for their energy and passion just fall this hard. So
I can't blame the fan base for being deflated. I would just I'm gonna when the gauntlet comes up, I'm gonna be cheering just as hard for them as I have been. Yeah. So I can totally understand where everybody is I watched that series live, and the entire time I'm just going, oh god. The only redeeming quality was that I got the Hans Sama pop off. I finally got to see Forgiven level Hans Sama, and it was awesome. But at the same time, my heart was getting ripped out of my chest because Unicorns looked so bad. Unfortunate. We do have another team that did also get eliminated this weekend, but they don't tread on Splyce.
Yeah.
Damn, they looked good.
They looked great.
They were impressive.
It was a great series. I really do feel like it was, if not the series of the week, I think CLG Envious was the series of the week, and we'll get to that on tomorrow's show. But this was a great best of 5, back and forth, really, a lot of key moments. It really came down to 1 or 2 mistakes on both sides, I think, that ended up sealing the day. And I love when we get to those points because it tells us that, here's this Splyce team that we thought wasn't going to be able to come out and compete. And it's close, and it's damn close. And it's close because the entire team, out of nowhere, remembered what Splyce is. This was our frustration forever, is this they weren't playing to what they do well. You could tell that Yamato Cannon had left. You could tell that there wasn't this strong coaching kind of influence there, and that things had really fallen apart. And this was a series in which they refound that identity. They stepped back into what Splyce does. And what does Splyce love? Splyce loves scaling, late game team fights, playing around these kind of macro rotations and making sure that they can capitalize on any mistake that you make. And that's what they did. And they did it beautifully in game 1. I thought that, Trashy's Jarvan looked surprisingly good. I was not expecting Trashy to look...
I'm not surprised. I'm really not, because, think about the champions that he's good at. He's good at Gragas, the champions that he's really good at. Gragas and Rek'Sai. They have that level 3, that's when we can gank with flash type gank pattern, and Jarvan fits that to a T. He brings the CC. It does not surprise me that he's a solid Jarvan player. What surprises me is that over the course of the series, it seemed like he was kind of outplaying Trick. Which, I mean, I never ever thought I would say that, and I think that is more something to discuss about G2. I still don't trust Trashy if the meta ever changes. If the meta stays like this forever, Trashy's a solid jungler. But we all know it doesn't. It's going to change.
Picking up the Sejuani is the one thing that I would point to. Maybe it could change. Maybe he is learning things.
Sejuani is the same thing as the
I'm not saying that he shouldn't be able to play it, but we have a whole bunch of evidence from the regular season that it wasn't going very well. And this time it went very well.
Smithy would like to talk to you about Sejuani not going well and then getting better at it. So,
Look, you're not wrong. But you know what? This was exactly the kind of team that made me want to give him 3 All-Pro spots this split. This is, Senkux looked great. His rotations were awesome. I thought that he was always in the right place at the right time. He played the Galio out really well. I thought that in general, Kabi and Mickey looked solid. I think Mickey in particular looked very consistent and saw a lot of good lane trades. I think Kabi kind of was limited by the champions that he chose to really focus on. A lot of Jhin, a lot of Xayah. Because he really likes that mid-game spike.
Jhin is just
he wants it the 20-minute. It's not great in this meta, but it's something that Kabi's very good at, and they do enough with it. I don't think it was a great pick here, and I do think it cost him, especially in some of the games that really turned against them. Game 2 was a great example where he was technically ahead for a good chunk of it, but it didn't matter because he wasn't accomplishing much with it, and so all that G2 had to do was we'll rotate over here where we can get all the resources, and what are you going to do? We won't do anything when we lose. But there are basically, these series came down to two things that Splyce did wrong, and they are very learnable things to fix for the Gauntlet. Number 1, Game 3, they did not understand the limitations of their composition. I think that Baron play was one that they absolutely should not have taken, because they do not have enough damage on their roster to nuke down a Cho'Gath who is feeling very healthy at that point in the game. That was a mistake. They spent everything on him. They tried to nuke him as hard as they could, and they got him about 2/3 of the way, and there was just nothing left, and they got wiped, and things just spiraled from there. I think a lot of that's a compositional failing. I'm not sure that Jace was necessarily the best idea into that. Wins lane, but doesn't give you what you needed on the back end there. So, I think that that's something they could easily fix, either by playing around the map a little bit differently or just having more damage in your composition. And Game 5, they got outflanked twice. They didn't have wards to protect their backside, and Perks made the brilliant play, came around the side, got that great play at the Elder Dragon.
Yeah, Perks.
Able to make that.
Perks.
Perks is a very good player. I have never said otherwise, and I will not say otherwise. But it was one of those things where it was not just that he was a good player, it was that he was a smart player. He was an intelligent player. And he made a move that I think, as a spectator, we can kind of lose a sense of how intelligent that is, right? Because all we see is he makes the little loop around and the fight's there because we know that the enemy team is there and we know that they don't have a ward and we know that flank's going to work. But he didn't know that, and G2 didn't know that. Yeah. This was a gamble for him. If there was a ward there and they were able to peel and nuke him down, it's a whole different story.
Right.
But I think that he had a very good sense of where, over the course of the series, Splyce hadn't warded. And if you go back through some of these Elder Dragon fights, you will notice that Splyce doesn't protect that backside. And you know what? That is one of those things I want to praise Young Buck. I want to say that he must have noticed that in the film and as he's watching the games and he's like, we got to attack that, and Perks had that in mind. I don't know. That might be me trying to assign more credit to coach because I'm a former coach and I want to give coaches credit for what they do. But even if you think that it's 100% Perks, it was very intelligent from G2. And it was not this monumental, oh my God, I can't believe Splyce made that mistake. A lot of teams make that mistake. At Game 5 of a do or die series in which they are the underdogs and they have this tenuous lead, I have a hard time hating on them for that. I find it very difficult to say that this is something we should just condemn and how dare they have thrown the series away. I think that overall it was a strong performance. I was impressed more than I was frustrated by them, and I think that if they can take what they learned in this matchup, just the growth between the end of the split to this, if they can take another leap before the gauntlet,
this is the closest.
Splyce has some talent on the team, man.
Yeah, this is the closest that they've looked to that summer 2016 form.
Yeah,
where they were on fire. Played a strong series against G2, made it to Worlds. This is the strongest they've looked in a while. Marty had a statement where I forget what website it was, but he did an interview and he's like, I have the utmost faith in these 5 guys. And it's when I first thought about it, I was like, yeah, but really? Should he be saying that? Really? That just kind of feels like you're backing yourself into a corner. But he's got faith in these guys. And if they can pull this out and they can have a good run in the gauntlet, I think it's worth running back. The only issue I really have is just when the meta changes and Trashy can't play Kha'Zix and Graves and all of these assassin-y kind of junglers, do you just go out and get a jungle? Do you go get a second jungler and just be yeah, when it's tanky Trashy time, we're going to play Trashy, and when it's assassin-y not Trashy time, we're not going to play Trashy? Maybe that's the next evolutionary step. Gilius. They should just go get Gilius.
Oh my
God. Get Gilius. Marty, get Gilius. I'm sorry, I'm going to move on from that. We're actually going to move on to players that are playing this weekend in the LCS finals and not the promotional series.
I was going to say, technically they're playing this week.
Playoffs. They are. Yeah, they're playing against Shulk. That'll be a fun series. But, Chase, we are going to go ahead and move on to actual games this week. We're going to start off with the Saturday matchup of Fnatic versus Misfits. So, we already kind of talked about Unicorns of Love. You decided to instead use that moment to mainly gush about Misfits.
Hey.
I'm not saying that harshly. I'm just saying you've already kind of said a lot of things about Misfits, but we didn't really touch on the Hans Sama point. And I know you want to talk about Power of Evil. Talk to me about Hans Sama. What did you notice that they were doing differently in this series that, from the previous weeks that really made Hans Sama and then even Power of Evil shine on these 80 carries?
You know what? I don't want to talk about Power of Evil. Power of Evil is the third most interesting player from this series. Look, I like Power of Evil. He's a great player.
Glorious.
But this is something where you and I have talked about this in private. To take the leap from being a very good player to a great one involves being able to understand when to take a step back and let your teammates shine and help them be better. And this was the huge thing for me when I was the most frustrated with this team, was when Power of Evil, at the time I wrote my article for Unicorn, was getting 25.2% of his team's gold, which was the most of any single player in Europe, second in the West behind only Jensen. And he had this tendency to try to do too much. He'd overextend for these big power plays. And the last couple weeks, Misfits have been trying to shift the goal down there a little bit more, be a little bit more balanced. It didn't look great from what we were seeing on the stage, but they were trying new things. They needed to adapt. And if you look at the gold disparity in this series, Hans Sama, 26.1% of the team's gold. Power of Evil just 22.4. That is a huge shift. A, that's a shift that falls much more in line with where we think the meta should be. B, that falls much more in line with your, in my opinion, of Hans Sama, which is that Hans Sama's really good at the game of League of Legends. Like, he's just really good at this game. And it was so nice to see him be good at this game, and it was so nice to see him kind of put these pieces together and really just take out his lane opponents, take out in these team fights. Just, I mean, he was clean, and he was clean on everything that he played. And I think that, you know, the number of times, I'm just looking at my notes now, where I had Hans Sama in all caps with at least one exclamation point. I think that he had an amazing series, and it was nice to see him finally be given the opportunity to carry. And you know who else I'm really glad got an opportunity to do some carry things? Maxlor, my boy. I've been in the Maxlor camp for so long. It's the one reason I rated Misfits so high this offseason. I love this player, and everyone's been asking me, are you out on him yet, finally? Are you done with this whole Maxlor thing? And I said, look, he's doing his role well. When he's put in a better role, I think he's going to look great. 41.0 KDA. Bring it on home, Maxlor. But more importantly than the KDA, which really is irrelevant given that's only a 3-game series, he played Poppy. He played Poppy jungle. That is a pick that only the Unicorns of Love had done by that point, and is still not something that we've seen widely executed well in an attempt to counter the Zac pick. And Maxlor played it perfectly. In fact, he might have done it a little bit better than Xerxes did it.
Shut your damn mouth.
I was shocked too. It was an amazing game. I'm not saying that I was expecting it. Wow. I'm not saying that Max is a better player across the board, though he's getting there. I just thought it was a really great Poppy game. He really understood the ins and outs and how to make use of those initiations and disengage at the right time and catch out this Zac and really make it difficult for Unicorns to make a play. And then you add on to that, suddenly Alfari's like winning lane every now and then, and he's getting some really nice initiations, and he's actually being a contributing member to his own team. He didn't die once this whole series, despite being by far the weakest link during the regular season. I mean, this is exactly the Misfits team that when I thought they could be the second best team in the league, this is how I drew it up. Maxlor was going to make their communication sharper, and he was going to fill his role great. Alfari is going to continue to be a monster. Ignar is going to continue to be a playmaker. All three of those came through this week when, at best, only one of them had come through in any week previous to this.
So now it's time to burst the bubble, Chase. Chase, who are they playing this week?
They're playing a much better team. They're playing Fnatic, and this is where hope goes.
This is where Chase gets very, very sad.
Sad is a harsh word. I like this Fnatic team.
This is true.
I love everybody, as I like to say on this show. And, you know, I like good League of Legends. And the reason I like Fnatic is because they've been the best at performing great League of Legends games consistently over the course of this split. And they've done it in split push strategies that I think they could absolutely execute against Misfits. The one thing that we haven't really seen Misfits be able to do is really encounter that 1-3-1 very effectively. I think that if they get spread out and they're unable to necessarily make as many quick rotations as they'd like, you know, they really like forcing those skirmishes. If you spread them out and they can't do that, I think the Misfits could have a problem there. And I think, on the other hand, Fnatic's team fighting has also been great when they've opted into those kind of compositions. I think that Fnatic can pick scaling comps and have really late game fights with something like Sivir as a hyper carry in the late game, or a Caitlyn. I could totally see, you know, this kind of mid-game spike with something like a Xayah, and really trying to, you know, force to get cap something like a LeBlanc or a Syndra or any of these other mages that really can spike at that time and really take advantage of fights around Baron and kind of close out with the efficiency that they've shown. The thing about Misfits is that as good as they looked against Unicorns of Love, they only had to counter one thing. And Unicorns of Love made it easier for them by doing the one thing that Unicorns of Love do really well, as poorly as they have done it this season, which is trying to have those kind of constant skirmishes. Fnatic doesn't need to constantly skirmish Misfits. Misfits are going to try to force fights. They're certainly going to do their best, but Broxa is one of the best defensive gankers in the West. I think he was the best jungler in Europe, and I probably in North America too. It really depends. I thought Roxas can absolutely make sure that he's there at the right place at the right time and that Maxlor isn't getting the upper hand on him on any of these rotations. I don't think that Reckless is going to care at all that Hansam is looking great. I think Reckless is Reckless, and I think that bot lane's going to be just fine. Caps is not afraid of Power of Evil. I think that lane's at least going to be close. And Soaz right now, first team All-Pro Soaz, is playing out of his mind. And I think that Alfari, as good as he looked last week, we've had a lot more games in which he didn't look all that great. And I think that that's what I'm more expecting to show up in this high-pressure situation. And there's one other thing that Fnatic has going their way that Misfits doesn't. We don't know if Misfits can take a punch. We have not seen Misfits lose a game one and then come back to win a series. I guess technically you could say that Splyce self-imploding series from last split where they were down 2-0 and then came back, but I think a lot of that was Splyce opening the door in a way. I don't think Fnatic's going to. I think that Misfits are going to have to rise to the occasion, which means playing as well as they did last week while trying to adapt to multiple different styles that Fnatic can bring out there. I just think this team, as much as I commend them for the growth that they've made, and the Misfits should feel great about how much they were able to grow and adapt their system to where it needed to be in such a limited amount of time.
Fnatic's done just that as well.
Fnatic's really good. Fnatic's really good at League of Legends.
We this is something you and I don't know if we brought this up on the pod, but you and I have talked about privately behind the scenes of, like, you know, Misfits has done this transition away from Power of Evil being the, 90% of the resources and everyone kind of picks up the scraps. But we talked about how pre-Rift Rivals, Fnatic was like exclusively a 1-3-1 split push team. And then after Rift Rivals, now they're actually like an objective team fighting focused teams, and Reckless is actually playing meta 80 carries. Yeah. Which, like, Twitch is a meta 80 carry right now. So he can, like, play Twitch. He can play Xayah. Like, he can play Kalista, which is something that Reckless has always been amazing at. Like, as much as we praise Misfits for making this change, Fnatic did it. They did it better. And now it adds a second, a second gun in their holster, where if Misfits comes out firing and unloads all 6 shots and Fnatic unloads all 6 shots, all of a sudden there's a second gun in Fnatic's hand, and I don't think Misfits has one. Like, do you think that's off base, or do you think that's pretty realistic?
I think that's very realistic. I think that Fnatic have demonstrated both as a team and as an organization that they understand how to handle playoffs. They've got a lot of veterans on here who have been there before. They've got a lot of guys who, understand just this depth of a career that most of these players have had, different metas at different times, at different eras. If you look at someone like Jez's, I think that this is a team that will be 100% ready to go. Dylan Falco is going to have them all revved up. They've got a whole extra week of film on Misfits. They've been sitting back and getting to relax and refresh. They didn't have, a do-or-die series last week in which if they lost, they were going to be at the bottom of the gauntlet and have to battle their way all the way back up, which Misfits really did not want to do, and I don't think would have ended very well for them. So I think that all of the pressure is on Misfits, and Fnatic just needs to play their game. And, oh, by the way, we haven't brought this up yet, but I do feel it's worth mentioning, Dylan Falco versus Daku. I know which coach I'm trusting here. I'm not saying that, like, I appreciate Daku for last week. However, I'm going to go with the guy who has produced a lot of great teams in, different regions, even if they didn't all have the same happy ending that it looks like Fnatic is moving towards.
He's had his hand with a lot of successful teams.
Yes.
With a lot of them. Even the Envious roster last split, where, he highlighted his best player and I think really set kind of the foundation for what they were able to accomplish this split. He's left his mark on quite a number of teams, and it's nice to see him in the spot. Chase, I know you trust Dylan Falco. I know you probably trust every single player on Fnatic more than their Misfits counterparts. So it's down to brass tacks here. I am up 2 points on you in the challenge.
I don't like it.
4 opportunities to earn a point against me. Mm-hmm. This is the first point.
Well, no, the gauntlet's included in this too.
Oh yeah, gauntlet's included in this. That's right.
I've got a little bit more time.
I don't think we
But
count
this
the
is
gauntlet this year. I think we're going to cut the gauntlet out. No,
I wonder
think we're
how you
going
would
to take
feel
it
that
out.
way.
I think we're going to take it out this year. It's not going to count this year. That being said, just for canon purposes, so what I just said was true, where do you think the line is on Fnatic versus Misfits?
I think that the casinos are going to have no faith in Misfits. I think that this is a one-sided series on paper, and as much as we would love to believe the Misfits have moved the bar and this is the new team, we've got a lot of games that tell us that that's not the case. This was a team with a losing record at the end of the split, lest we forget. I have Fnatic minus 500.
Yep, you're going to get this one. I did not go high enough. I said Fnatic minus 333. It is Fnatic minus 526.
There you go.
Misfits are plus 340 underdogs.
Yeah, I was going back and forth between minus 400 and minus 500. I don't think their Misfits are getting much credit for last week.
Fnatic 2-0 is at plus 175?
You mean
Or
3-1?
Yeah, 3-0.
So minus 2.5?
Minus 2.5 is plus 175.
Got it. Okay. What about a Misfits like plus 1.5?
Plus 145.
Okay. 5 maps?
Plus 240. It's not happening. 5 maps is not happening.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
if I
not happening.
like any of these, which, by the way, is exactly why we told you guys not to bet last week. In all reality, we actually went basically even in Europe. We won our bet on Splyce keeping it close. We lost our bet where we trusted Unicorns of Love to take care of business. So we lost a whole $5. Mm-hmm. We're 13 and 16 on the split. $8 in the black. We've made money compared to last split. I guess we'll take it, but this is another one of those series in which I have a feeling we're going to make a smart money bet because we run a podcast in which we make smart money bets. But I'm not necessarily going to recommend that anyone else follows.
Again, there's just no value in Europe because I think the good teams are that much better than the bad teams. Moving on.
Misfits had something to say about that last week.
28-3. Moving on. H2K versus G2.
Wow.
H2K versus G2. G2 coming off of a very hard-fought series against Splyce. H2K sort of stumbling their way into the #1 seed in their group, losing out to Unicorns of Love in the last week of the season, last match of the season. But overall looking pretty strong, looking like H2K, a team that was in the semifinals of Worlds last year. Just want to bring that up because that's pretty strong. But this is a pretty important match for H2K when it comes to seeding for the gauntlet because they were in the 5th, 6th spot in the spring and only got 10 points. So if they don't want to have to make a really long run in the gauntlet, they need to kind of win this series and knock off G2 or else they're probably going to be in that very first match. Chase, going into this, kind of what were some of your thoughts on G2 coming out of that Splyce match? I'm up in the air. Like you said, they had some pretty solid moments, and it seemed mainly focused around perks. But it seemed like the other stars on this team, Sven and Trick, were sort of, I want to say, non-existent. Like, they didn't stand out to me at all.
It's funny that you say that because according to the numbers, the exact opposite is true. Perks actually had the lowest KDA of any of the players last week on G2 with a 2.7. He died 17 times. 66.7% kill participation, and most surprisingly, negative 302 goal differential at 10 minutes. He was losing quite a bit to Senkux in the early game. While Sven was at least winning his lane, I think a lot of what we saw with this team is that we expect a couple things from a G2 win.
Definitely.
One, we expect G2 to be able to control the map because we expect Trick to be able to put his influence on the map because he usually is so good at this whole jungle control thing. It's kind of his shtick over the years. And we're supposed to believe that they're going to just take a couple of these towers, and as soon as they get a neutral objective, bam, off they go. And one of the most alarming things I think that G2 have to look at for this week, they had a 39.2 early game rating. They sucked in the first 10 minutes. In the first 15 minutes, it was kind of questionable. And against H2K, that is a death sentence. That is H2K's thing. Like, and more than it was Misfits' thing. H2K leads the league in early game rating because they have this crazy snowball tendency. That's what they do. They get Jankos going, and Jankos gets the first kill, and that gets Vivin going.
Let's pause here. Let us pause here. Because you act as if this is some infallible, invincible thing that because H2K has such a brilliant early game. How long have we been watching H2K as a team, Chase?
Look,
like 4 years?
Hey, I'm getting there. You're cutting me off along the way.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to like build them up to be like, yeah, there's these monsters in the early game, they're undefeatable, and then just be like, no, everyone, let's not forget they don't know what they're doing in the late game.
Yeah, we'll get to H2K in a bit, but like I don't care how bad H2K's late game is if your early game is this bad, G2. You cannot recover again. Like if you're losing that much in the early game to Splyce, like Jankos versus Trashy. Like you see my point, right? Like this is a concern to me. And it's certainly one of the, you look at it, especially in terms of just sheer jungle control. They didn't have it for good chunks of these series. They would end up kind of getting it towards the late game, but you really saw 0% of first towers in this series, 40% of first 3 towers in the series, only 40% of Rift Heralds. They were behind on lane efficiency, which is something we're not used to seeing. So this team that is known for their efficiency wasn't all that efficient this week. That's a concern. The second thing that we know about a G2 victory, I should say, is that they're supposed to be able to do it by this team fighting around neutral objectives that then hyper efficient use of that resource. And certainly you saw elements of that. Game 3 was a game that was decided because they picked the right fight at the Baron, and they were able to execute that. They got that Baron, got a massive push, and the game went their way for the rest of the day. I think that Game 2 was a good example of a team. Like, they had full objective control, got every dragon, got every Baron. But their vision didn't look quite right at times. And we saw, especially in Game 4, they were giving up objectives that they didn't need to give up. And as the game went on, they were making more mistakes, not fewer. They were opening themselves up. They were leaving like little holes in their skirmishes that, sometimes Sven just wasn't quite in the right spot and he'd get killed on this Tristana a little bit too early. You saw that with Perks and his Cassiopeia positioning at times, where he would be a little bit caught out and Splyce was able to just jump on it. It felt like Splyce in those late game fights was doing better target selection, was picking their moments a little bit more cleanly. And G2, I think, are ultimately the more talented team. I think that they've been better for longer this split. And so I think that they ultimately were able to adjust. And again, I got to give them credit for that Game 5 win, because I think a lot of that had to do with intelligence and understanding how to make use of that correct flanking path. And I want to give Young Buck some credit, because I thought that these drafts were mostly very good. I don't think that G2 was outdrafted at any real point in the series, except maybe Game 4, and even that's a little questionable. I think that G2 has a point at the mid-game where that could have worked out quite well. I think the problem for me is that this is just not the clean, crisp G2 esports that we're used to. This is a Perks that's dying more often than we're used to. This is a Sven that isn't the same kind of just team fight, wipe the enemy board, and now I'm just taking over the game. We're seeing Mithy is not. Mithy actually had a very good series. I should give credit for that.
Yeah.
He got the MVP of the series. I thought that it was well deserved. I thought his Thresh was great. I thought his Morgana was great. I thought that in general, that Alistar obviously in Game 5 was massive. If you look at the other big moment that ultimately decided the series, that was almost entirely just him making this insane play. And as Arby, who is in our Discord and everything else, we love giving support some love. This is a support that deserves some love. But I think for the rest of G2, this was a step behind where we expect them to be. And it's hard to take away from G2 without kind of discrediting Splyce for making it such a close series. I don't think that either team played badly. This is not like G2 didn't look great and they were like Splyce only competed because G2 didn't look great. I thought G2 looked good, at times even very good, but I don't think they looked great. And I think that it's not the same era of the 3-time champs.
Its expectation of G2 was so incredibly high that they just absolutely failed to meet them this split at all. And I don't think you can call anything they did in that series very good because what our expectations are of this team in general. There's a reason they're 3-time back-to-back-to-back EULCS champions, and I don't think it's going to happen a fourth. I love my man Ocelot. I root for him all. I love rooting for G2 because I think out of all the teams, they're the team that has the most personality in the players necessarily. Not, I think H2K as an organization has more personality than G2. But like G2, I love rooting for some of these guys. And I guess you sort of like missed what I was saying was that I felt like even though Perkz was dying so much, he was the one that was really making the plays. That was him and Expect. Expect was on another level, and I've said this before. Like the growth of Expect in a year and a half has been just incredible, and I don't know who's coaching him. I don't know if it's just this guy. Once again, this is the guy we wanted Seraph to turn into, and Expect is there, and he is blown by all of our expectations. So now, Chase, let us get to the terrible late game that H2K has, and why the early games mean absolutely nothing.
See, okay, I hate saying absolutely nothing because obviously
it's for dramatic effect.
It's for that whole hyperbole fun stuff, but it is worth pointing out, right, that H2K, because they won their group, are in this weird spot where they have to play the 3-time defending champs, which is not ideal. They lost to G2 earlier in the split in a loss that was so disappointing that Quickshot felt the need to come out on Reddit and talk about how he believes that, like, man, it seems like G2 or H2K just fails to step up in big moments. Like that was true. That was a huge, disappointing, just deflating balloon moment where we saw that this H2K team is just, it's two different teams. H2K in their 9 wins is 9-0, like 18-0. They do not lose a map when they win a series. It's amazing. 18-0, 9 2-0s over the course of a season. Anyone doing that in any other context, we'd be like, okay, well, this is clearly the best team. Look at how they're stomping people. Look at how dominant. That's what we expect a KT Rolster to do, right? And then you look at in their losses, they're 3-8. And they have these these losses are losses to teams that we actually respect. What are the losses this split? Well, they lost to Fnatic. Well, that's not a good sign because that's who they would play in the finals. They lost to G2. That's not a good sign because that's who they're playing right now. And they lost to the Unicorns of Love twice, which is not a good sign because losing to the Unicorns of Love as often as they have this season is probably a sign that they're not great at adapting to weird things that your opponent does, which is a thing that everyone in the playoffs is trying to do.
That. No, G2 isn't doing anything weird. G2 is doing nothing weird.
Nunu jungle just a few months ago.
Nunu's not weird. Nunu's not
it
weird.
Was at
Shrimp
the time.
plays it. Shrimp plays
it was at the time. Look,
we have to talk about the current, not the time, and G2 isn't doing anything special. Let's be honest.
Not at this moment, but I would not feel self-assured in that if I'm an H2K, and I think they're in this kind of precarious situation where right now they are a team that has so much raw talent on it that they can just beat up all of the lower tier teams. No problem. Just smashes them. But when they have to play these great teams, not great players. Like, all of their players are great, but when they have to play these teams that know how to play as a unit and do so cohesively and can survive H2K's early game, well, then H2K is left looking back and saying, well, I don't know what to do. We were supposed to be ahead right now. Now we're not ahead. Now our composition doesn't work, or now we don't feel comfortable making the engages that we need to make, or whatever it is that day. But it's, oh, well, now we're done because we're behind at the 15-minute mark, and that's something that we as a team have no idea how to handle. And to be that kind of one-dimensional, I think, especially in a playoff context, is maddening. It's something that makes it so... I think it's one of the reasons why people are so quick to dismiss H2K's accomplishments as a team, which I know has to be frustrating to people like Chris Chans, who's in our Discord and is a huge H2K fan. people dismiss the fact that they went to the semifinals at Worlds last split because people have been looking for a reason to discard this team and disown their accomplishments because they win. When they lose so badly, and it's in such a like they just don't seem to know what they're doing kind of way. So then how could we possibly give them credit for that? Look at how they didn't know the things that they're supposed to know. But the thing is, yeah, they didn't know the things, but they're so good at these mechanics and the essentials. They're basically Europe's version of KT Rolster. It's a whole bunch of players who are all very good at their position, top 3 potentially at each one for Europe, that are all great individually and don't seem to coalesce into a cohesive whole. And that's the other element. And I think you could say this about KT as well. H2K, when it matters most, we've been here before, with one exception, and Forgiven will forever be great. Forgiven will always be grateful to H2K for having the opportunity to do it, and it certainly seemed like he gave them enough to get them past that barrier for at least a little bit. But when it matters most, this H2K team doesn't seem to know how to pull it home. And that's been something that's been true almost every split that Prawley has been the coach of this team. That's been an identity thing that we can point to going back to 2015.
They don't know how to finish. They don't know how to finish anything. They don't know how to finish a game. They don't know how to finish a series. They don't know how to finish a tournament. They don't know how to finish the playoffs.
I'd be afraid to give them like a poster because I'm not sure they would know how to finish the autograph. They'd be like 2/3 of the letters through, and then they'd just give it back to me. And
H2.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, man, I guess there we go.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, look, it's
Thank you for laughing at that. That wasn't very
You're
funny.
welcome. It's a concern. I'm concerned both that I laughed at that and that this H2K team just doesn't seem to understand how to make that next step forward. And it's been long enough with this group of players that honestly, if they don't win this series, if they don't win when they have side advantage, after they've won a group against a G2 team that is slumping as much as we have noted that they are, I mean, you have to blow this up, right? Like, this is a team you have to blow up. I mean, I guess you could say, like, if they qualify through the gauntlet.
Like, what? But blowing up a team comes down to what are your goals. And if H2K's goals are just like, yeah, we're cool being, a top 3 team in Europe, and, every other year we'll go to Worlds and, like, that kind of thing. Like, no, like, you keep this team together. Just talent-wise, it's fantastic. I know you're looking at me like, wait a minute, this isn't the Walter I know.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. Walter Fedczuk.
I'm being the devil.
Fedczuk.
I have to be the devil's advocate here because I know you're like, blow it up if they don't make it. And I agree with that. But in order to have conversation, someone needs to take the opposing side here. And I'm going to take the opposing side and just be like, I think the players, I can't talk about like Che and Nuclear just because they're Koreans and they're robots and they don't have any personalities, whatever. But like Prawley, Odoamne, Jankos, the social
Jankos
media
wants
manager,
to win. Like Jankos and Forgiven are two hyper competitive guys.
Does he though? Because
yes.
I feel like he's having a lot of fun with all of the like couch segments where he just gets to like lambast everyone else and just be like, Forgiven taught him very well about how to trash talk. Because his trash talk game is A1 tier.
You know awesome. What the problem with trash talk is? When you don't do well, it's turned against you, and then it's not so fun anymore. Like, this is fun for them because they've been winning. Yeah, so they get to take shots at people. Because you know what? You can take all the shots you want from the couch during the quarterfinals. You didn't have to play. Yeah. And certainly H2K were not the only ones. But if H2K come out this week and they lose this series, God forbid they lose it badly. Like it's a 3-1 or a 3-0,
yes. Yeah.
Which is in play. This is G2. It's always in play. I mean, I don't know as H2K how you bounce back for that. I don't know how you convince a couple of these players, especially I think Forgiven and Jankos are the two I'd look at as these hyper-competitive guys. I don't know how you get them to buy back in. I don't know how you win back their trust in Prawley as a coach. Like, I think there are serious systemic problems that are right now, and this is an article I'm going to be writing for Unicorn. It should be out within a couple of days. When this episode comes out, like, they are on this precipice of disaster where if things go well here, it's all well and good, and none of these worrywart problems are going to matter because they will have won the series and we'll be talking about how awesome they are and they made the leap and blah, 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 blah. But if they lose, They have to go through the gauntlet. In the first round of the gauntlet, potentially, depending on how Misfits does at this event.
Probably, yeah.
That's not a place that I think it's going to be very difficult to fight your way through 3 rounds of the gauntlet. It has never been done in Europe.
It's going to be Misfits, Unicorns of Love, and
Splyce
then Splyce.
Splyce is at the bottom. We know Splyce is at the bottom for a fact because they only got 10. They were out of the last
yeah, that's right.
Yes,
They lost.
So they have to go the distance.
Yeah.
But
it'd be Splyce, then Unicorns of Love, then Misfits.
It would all come down essentially to H2K and Misfits in a 3rd place game to see who gets a bye, is what we're potentially looking at if H2K loses here. And assuming Misfits loses here, because none of them could potentially bump Unicorns of Love down. Then it gets weird. Then we get into some shenanigans, and we've got a lot of things to talk about on that end. But overall, this is not the place H2K wants to be. I think that loss to the Unicorns of Love, even when the Unicorns of Love had nothing to play for, what that told me is that the problems that make H2K are not fixed, have not been fixed. And I don't know. We saw last playoffs, like, having faith that they would fix it for a big series is not necessarily going to pay off for you. I am very, very worried about H2K.
Well, I'm worried about H2K too, because I've seen the lines, and Chase, why don't you just give me your line? Why don't you just give me your line?
I said G2 minus 150.
Yeah, you get this
I think
point.
G2 are. Yeah, there you go.
Why? How? I'm very confused. Why? What?
Remember how you beat me a couple weeks ago because you went back to like the preseason ratings that Unicorn did, and you looked at what they thought of these teams and went back to the system? Well, it turns out that Unicorn's been giving G2 a lot of benefit of the doubt. I don't know, probably those 3 titles that they've won.
Yep.
And H2K has no good win on their resume that is going to boost their formula up. So that's why I had it the way that I did. What's the actual line?
I had H2K minus 185. I don't know why I put it at minus 185. In all honesty, I should have put it at like H2K minus 140 or 135 or something like that. It's G2 minus 172. H2K are at plus 130.
There we go.
Doesn't this feel like if there's ever going to be the H2K moment, it's going to be this? This is the nobody believes in us because we've never ever proven we could do anything on the big stage moment? Or is this the no, we've never done anything on the big stage moment, we're scared, we're soiling ourselves, please don't make us do this, oh please don't make us do this?
I mean, the problem with that is they've all been here in the playoffs before. So it's, I mean, if they want to pull the nobody believes in us, you know what? The fact that you are underdogs when you have side advantage and had a first round bye, I'll put it this way. If that's not going to do it, nothing will. If that cannot inspire the best version of H2K, then...
This is like when the Seattle Seahawks were 7-9 and hosting a divisional round in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's where we are, for the record, if anyone's curious.
Awful.
Welcome to Europe, LCS. That's where we are nowadays.
This is why it just is so boring and just so not fun for me to watch this split. Other like interesting ones, G2 at minus 1.5 is at plus 130.
Okay.
Interesting. 5 maps are at plus 170. That's interesting. That's it. That's really all that there is for interest.
So for our smart money bets,
okay,
I guess we need to make 2 because we do this as a podcast and not as bookies that are going to be answerable if...
It's your fault. We could have just sat back on our laurels, taken our $12 home, and just been like, yeah, we're smart. Don't gamble on this.
Look, man, compared to the 2 bets you took in North America, I think I'm doing all right. But I'm going to say... I feel like a H2K collapse is more likely than them going to 5. Because I feel like if H2K wins, they do it in 4.
Okay.
I don't think... Like, I don't feel like...
I don't trust them in a 5-game series. I don't trust them in a game 5.
No, I don't either. I think they. I think that if it's 1-1, I think it's solved in 4, and I don't know which side it's going to be, but I think it's more likely that it's G2, which is why I think we should go for G2 minus 1.5 or plus 130.
Okay.
Do we want to bet on the Fnatic 3-0, like the ultimate Misfits
Yeah, let's
letdown?
just do it. It's not going to happen, but
it's more fun that way. I mean, not fun for Misfits fans, but you know.
I think it's hilarious. I think that's amazing. Yeah, so plus 175 on that. So our two smart money bets are going to be Fnatic to take the 2-0, so the minus 2.5 at plus 175, and G2 minus 1.5 at plus 130. I mean, I don't want to gamble on either of these just because something stupid and silly is going to happen, but those are our smart money bets because Chase is making us follow the rules of the podcast that we run and that we make the rules, and we literally have the right to change them at any moment. Just I'm going to write a rule that prevents you from taking the belt from me. So it's done.
If you've got a problem with the rules, hashtag set the rules. That's what I say to you, good sir. Hashtag set the rules.
I set that up. That is
absolutely terrible. You did.
That is
I appreciate you for it, good sir.
That's awful. That's awful. It's also awful that you gained a point on me, and it's now 12-11. I'm not happy about this. I really don't think the gauntlet should count.
I think it should count. I think it's just fine where it is, being part of our lovely challenge here.
I mean, you should know why I don't want it to count. There's actual like real life implications and reasons why it maybe shouldn't count.
Ooh.
I don't know. Maybe something that I had mentioned to you and talked about and could have been, I don't know, whatever, But if you want to hear reasons why Chase thinks that the gauntlet should count for our little competition and why he thinks that he should, earn a chance, I guess, to attempt to win the championship belt back, Chase, where can they follow you?
You can find me at RedShirtKing. You can talk to me about any of the things I said today. I am still excited about the European region. I know it's rough, especially for Unicorns of Love fans. It's easy to get down in the dumps and say, well, G2 isn't there, and who's going to be the team that's really going to step up in that big moment?
It's going to be Fnatic.
But I am excited to see who can step up this week, and I would love to talk to you guys about it on Twitter. I'd love to talk about it to you guys in the YouTube comment section below. I love responding to each of you guys there. And, of course, we've got our lovely Discord, which you can find in the video description. Lots of awesome listeners on there talking about all of these things. And we even have our own resident memer who really deserves more love. Shout out to a Kegel. It's the latest title that we've given out. I didn't know we were going to have one, but we have one I'm really happy with. And it's been great to see.
I think we need to bring back the profile picture rule when you lose and make change your profile picture to that meme because you're the curator of that meme. You're the reason that meme has been created. It's pretty funny. You guys can go take a look at it.
Like just so they can see for themselves. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, it's on. I think my Twitter page. I think I uploaded it. It was retweeted from the @RoughDraftsPod Twitter account. If you want to follow the show, and if you want to give me an old follow, I'm @Ceades_LOL. And it should be an interesting couple of games over in Europe this week. But come back tomorrow for I think the real joy. I gotta say I'm on cloud 9, man. I'm on cloud 9. I'm so ecstatic. I had an excellent quarterfinals weekend in North America, and I'm sure all of you lovely, lovely listeners can't wait to hear me gloat about how I was right. And I'm not nearly as nice as Chase. So until next time, Cloud 9 fans, goodbye, Internet.
You can follow the Rough Drafts Podcast on all your favorite social media sites. Twitter @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, YouTube.com/RoughDraftsPodcast, as well as on iTunes by searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. The Rough Drafts Podcast is supported by our lovely Patreons at patreon.com/RoughDraftsPod and by viewers like you. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.